Good day, everyone. Welcome to Blacklogic. Two suspects arrested over the theft of the crown jewels from the Louvre Museum in Paris. Donald Trump touts his peacemaking skills as Thailand and Cambodia sign a ceasefire deal. Also, Trump raises tariffs on Canadian goods over an advert featuring Ronald Reagan. People are having fewer kids, and their choice is transforming the world's economy. U.S. government says it will stop paying for most federal food aid this week. So again, I have those updates for you guys, and we're going to break down how a lot of these things will affect not just United States of America, but the world itself. Right. So I know you guys have been hearing this story that two suspects was arrested over the theft of the crown jewels from the Louvre Museum in Paris. And in Paris, the world famous Louvre just got hit. These two men, supposedly in their 30s, have been arrested in connection with the theft of the royal jewels valued at around $88 million or 88 million pounds, rather, or euros. That is equivalent to $102 million. Now, the museum's Galleria of Poland, here's how they are stating that this heist went down. They state that the thieves disguised themselves as maintenance workers, used a furniture lift basket to get up in the side of the museum. They smashed the display cases in under 8 minutes and made off with 8 precious artifacts. Now, one suspect was caught at the Charles de Gaulle airport, attempted to board a flight to Algeria, and the other was located in St. Denis. So again, a lot of people online were hoping that these guys went away because we understand that the crown jewels of Napoleon, that a lot of the jewels in France that they have at the Louvre and other museums around the country have been stolen, mostly from the continent of Africa. So a lot of people were championing on, not that they're trying to promote lawlessness in France, but again, stealing the same jewels that in the early, 17, 1800s, that France allegedly stole from the continent of Africa. So again, they have suspects that are in custody now. In my personal opinion, I don't think that these are the two that committed the crime, because this, in my opinion, this was a mastermind. These are mastermind thieves. And why would they, one, try to fly out to Algeria instead of taking a ship or a boat that they could have paid the captain $100,000 to put him in a particular, one of these ore tankers, or they ship a lot of these mill vans, those big metal boxes, containers that ship a lot of import and exports to other countries. Why wouldn't they be more covert than to get on an airplane where you need identification? There's just so many complexity when you're trying to fly out. So I don't think these are the two. Now, again, I could be absolutely wrong. We just don't know until the evidence comes out. But yeah, a lot of people were championing on these guys like, yeah, they stole something that was stolen. But again, I'm not trying to promote lawlessness here on Blacklogic. But again, it's a very interesting story that I'm following. And hopefully you guys are just thinking about how they could have possibly got away. And these two are just puppets that are being used, that these are not the true criminals that committed this crime. Now, President Trump touts his peacemaking skills as Thailand and Cambodia signs a ceasefire deal because he showed up to the stage, and leaders from Thailand and Cambodian, even some mentioned that people were from Malaysia were there on stage with Donald Trump. And this was held at Kuala Lumpur, which is the capital of Malaysia. And he used the event to bolster his image as a global peacemaker. We can make peace around the world, but we can't make peace right here in America. I digress. Because framing the deal as proof of his leadership beyond U.S. border, and Southeast Asia is a very strategic region, and any diplomacy there impact U.S. influence, regional trade, and power dynamics with China, because a lot of these countries actually makes a lot of goods and products for America, let alone China. So again, we're making peace deals with Israel and Hamas. We're trying to make peace deals with Ukraine and Russia. We're making peace deal with Cambodia and Thailand. But It seems as though in America we're not making peace deal with the citizens versus the government. That's what it really boils down to. And I know a lot of people are not understanding, because when we hit this last story, we're talking about government assistance and welfare and EBT and SNAP and basically those social benefits that the government provide to millions of Americans. We're going to see that the racial dynamic that a lot of politics play really does not jive. Because again, as I keep telling you, it's really the elites in the government versus the people who are in the middle class and below. And we're going to get into that a little bit later, but I just wanted to show you guys how there's a lot of peacemaking deals around the world, but except right here in America, because the American government is still shut down. Now, here's a curveball, because when we look at Canada and the province of Ontario, they pulled an advertisement featuring the voice of Ronald Reagan opposing tariffs. And the ad in turn triggered an angry response from President Trump, who halted trade talks and implied punitive tariffs. Now we're punishing countries with tariffs. And the US and Canada are sparring over the ad's content, and that is escalating into a broader trade congestion, because tariffs affects everyday consumers, farmers, jobs. It's not just about big rhetoric. There are real people affected when tariffs hit and trade flows shift. And this is what I was stating just last week, that I hope that it pans out for America, that the strategy and tactics of using tariffs will be beneficial long term. Also, I stated last week that he's using a play out of former President Ronald Reagan's playbook of using tariffs as an effective tool. But there are some data points I failed to mention that I will let Ronald Reagan himself chime in on. Now, this is a 5-minute video. I think I may speed it up just a little bit, but I want you guys to hear primarily majority of the speech, because it's important to understand tariffs today, because President Trump, tariffs is a beautiful word. And as I was saying initially, that I can see how tariffs initially for a short period of time can be beneficial. And these are some of the same echoes that President Ronald Reagan in the late 1980s was speaking about. So without further ado, let's get right into that video, because I really want you guys to listen in how he was going to use, how he used tariffs very temporarily, and that how he had all this information and data to prove that using tariffs long term would not only hurt those countries, but also will hurt the American people.
My fellow Americans, Prime Minister Nakasone of Japan will be visiting me here at the White House next week. It's an important visit because while I expect to take up our relations with our good friend Japan, which overall remain excellent, recent disagreements between our two countries on the issue of trade will also be high on our agenda. As perhaps you've heard, last week I placed new duties on some Japanese products in response to Japan's inability to enforce their trade agreement with us on electronic devices called semiconductors. Now, imposing such tariffs or trade barrier practices that violated an agreement between Japan and the United States. We expect our trading partners to live up to their agreements. As I've often said, our commitment to free trade is also a commitment to fair trade. But you know, in imposing these tariffs, we were just trying to deal with a particular problem, not begin a trade war. So next week, I'll be giving Prime Minister Nakasone this same message. We want to continue to work cooperatively on trade problems and want very much to lift these trade restrictions as soon as evidence permits. We want to do this because we feel both Japan and the United States have an obligation to promote the prosperity and economic development that only free trade can bring. Now, that message of free trade is one I conveyed to Canada's leaders a few weeks ago, and it was warmly received there. Indeed, throughout the world, there's a growing realization that the way to prosperity for all nations is rejecting protectionist legislation and promoting fair and free competition. Now, there are sound historical reasons for this. For those of us who lived through the Great Depression, the memory of the suffering it caused is deep and searing. And today, many economic analysts and historians argue that high tariff legislation passed back in that period, called the Smoot-Hawley Tariff, greatly deepened the Depression and prevented economic recovery. You see, at first, when someone says, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports, It looks like they're doing the patriotic thing by protecting American products and jobs. And sometimes for a short while it works, but only for a short time. What eventually occurs is first, homegrown industries start relying on government protection in the form of high tariffs. They stop competing and stop making the innovative management and technological changes they need to succeed in world markets. And then, while all this is going on, something even worse occurs. High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and the triggering of fierce trade wars. The result is more and more tariffs, higher and higher trade barriers, and less competition. So soon, because of the prices made artificially high by tariffs that subsidize inefficiency and poor management, people stop buying. Then the worst happens. Markets shrink and collapse, businesses and industries shut down, and millions of people lose their jobs. The memory of all this occurring back in the 30s made me determined when I came to Washington to spare the American people the protectionist legislation that destroys prosperity. Now, it hasn't always been easy. There are those in the Congress, just as there were back in the 30s, who want to go for the quick political advantage, who risk America's prosperity for the sake of a short-term appeal to some special interest group, who forget that more than 5 million American jobs are directly tied to the foreign export business, and additional millions are tied to imports.
So I wonder how many people are going to come out and say to my comment section that happened such a long time ago. But he was relating how those data points that occurred back in the 1920s, how that started a depression during that time. And that when he came into office, that he wasn't going to do that. This was going to be used for a short term. So we know that, again, President Trump was touting at one point in time Reaganomics. But he's using these tariffs long term. He's making these permanent. Well, Blacklogic, what you need to understand is that we've never been given a fair deal with a lot of these countries. Ladies and gentlemen, the economists, people in the financial space all stated that using tariffs for a long time will affect America negatively and financially. So again, this kind of bleeds right into this next story I'm going to cover. Because here at home and across many nations, families are choosing to have fewer children. Like here for home, for example, the average births per woman has dropped to less than 2 children, per family, 1.6 that they had in some of the statistics that I was looking at. A shrinking younger workforce and a growing older population, pressures that are on pensions and 401ks, health systems. This changes the very fundamentals of economies. And I just want to point out some key things that this family was talking about in referencing to raising children, okay? It states that, but the Menchos also made a decision that increasingly common for families in the U.S. and around the world. One is enough. I don't need another one. They're talking to the kids like they're artifacts, like they're trinkets or a piece of furniture. By the way, I don't need another one. I don't want another one. I love having only one child, said Ashley Vancho, who works as a financial planner. Again, she probably already mapped this out on her budget. Like, wait a minute, more than one kid is way too much money economically in the current times that we live in. That's probably what she was stating. Her husband, Nick, an Episcopal priest, agreed that big families make less sense in today's economy. Big families make less sense in today's economy because things are so darn expensive. It really stacks the chips economically against you, he said. They go on to say that worldwide, the number of children born to the average family has dropped by more than half since the 1970s, according to the latest United Nations data. Economists say having fewer children is the norm for many families, especially in relatively prosperous countries like the U.S. So it don't matter how rich and powerful America is, a lot more families are having less children simply because it's so darn expensive. And here's the thing about the world markets: import, export, fair trade, equal trade. It doesn't really matter. Ladies and gentlemen, these markets and industries, they are the ones that control the price of products and services. So how we would state that every year in America, inflation, usually teeters around 1.3% to 2% each and every year, that things gain interest 2%. Now we're looking at 3%. Things are rapidly becoming more expensive. Now, gas have been fluctuating very low. I think in my area, it even got around to around $2.35 per gallon, and then it shot back up to $3, and now it's down to $2.50. So again, gas is kind of being attainable. Gas is kind of being within a manageable range, so to speak, because we're getting used to gas being around $2.50, $2.70. Most Americans are getting used to that. So I think if gas stays under $3, you won't hear too many Americans voice their opinion on the gas prices. But groceries are up over 5%. Products and services are up over 5%. When you look at the consumer price index, also known as the CPI, a lot of these things are up because these are all relating to tariffs in some degree. Now, granted, this is just the way of the world. When it comes to inflation, it rises 2% each and every year. And we have systematically and economically been aware, and we adapt, so on and so forth. But also the amount of money, whether it be hourly wages or salary wages, or when people are making a certain amount of money, those things tend to increase year after year as well with your yearly bonuses or your quarterly bonuses. Those subside the amount of inflation over the course of time, but not anymore. Those bonuses are going away. A matter of fact, there are a lot of companies going through RIFs. RIFs are reductions in force. And at first, they may get rid of people who may be quote unquote low performers or problem children. But guess what, ladies and gentlemen? There are high performers that are being laid off as well because they simply can't afford them. And if you are a high performer, they may offer you less than what the market state you should be earning. Take, for instance, you are a doctor, and the average doctor, let's say, makes $180,000. I know that's on a low total pole, depending on what type of doctor it is. I got it. This is very arbitrary. Usually that amount would be $180. Now they're saying like $150. They're literally wiping off anywhere from $10,000 to $30,000 of the usual and expected pay in a lot of these industries and these jobs. So again, all these things are related. Again, tariffs could be good in the beginning, but according to Ronald Reagan and quote unquote Reaganomics, even back till the late 20s and 30s, that long-term tariffs would be detrimental to the U.S. economy. And that's not even conjecture, that is proof and facts. Now, we've been hearing about food stamps, EBT, SNAP, supplemental nutrition, that a lot of these programs are going to stop sending out checks and aid because the United States Department of Agriculture has announced that due to the ongoing federal government shutdown, it will not use contingency funds to pay for November's benefits under the SNAP program, which we also know as the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. And that puts over 40 million Americans at risk of losing food aid benefits from November 1st. And for quite some time, non-Black populations in America will always tout as if Black people are the only one on welfare, that Black people are the only one that are receiving SNAP and CHIP as well as EBT. No, all demographics and races of America receive welfare from social programs that this government has put forth. Some areas more than others, and other areas more than other groups. So at one point in time, there probably were a great majority of Black people receiving government assistance. Then in other times, there were white people receiving more government assistance, so on and so forth. Because they used to put this stereotype out there that Black men and women were the welfare kings and queens, as if white people or Asian people or Hispanic people or even immigrants wasn't receiving supplemental benefits from the government. And we all are, and we all were. So again, let's get into the details, because again, this is really not about the people, in my opinion. This is war with the government, ladies and gentlemen. As it states here, food assistance used by more than 40 million Americans will not be distributed from November due to the ongoing U.S. government shutdown, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Bottom line, The well has run dry. The department said in a notice on its website, which also blamed Democrats in the Senate for the impasse. This is what I'm getting at. At a time of dire need to the American people, black, white, red, yellow, green, Hispanic, Asian, it doesn't matter. They're still trying to blame each other for people not receiving aid that a lot of these families need to support their families. And those of you who may be doing well financially in life and you voted for Trump, you're like, good, stop living off the government. You probably think it's majority of black people. Now, in percentages, that is an argument and debate that we could have in percentage. But when it comes to the raw numbers, unfortunately, majority of people on the SNAP program are white Americans. Let's dive back into the story. It goes on to state that the Supplemental Initiatives Program is used by 1 in every 8 American and plays a vital role in many grocery budgets. Earlier this month, the Trump administration declined to draw on a contingency fund that would have continued benefits, saying the money was needed for potential emergencies such as national disasters. Well, message, people not receiving food aid to supplement so their families can eat is a national disaster. That means we're going to have millions of Americans to go hungry. Is that not a natural disaster? Well, I digress. That's not natural. This is fabricated. This was made. We all knew that the snowball was going to turn into an avalanche, did we not? We knew by doing some of these things and the government shutdown and high inflation and tariffs, we knew that all of these were different, data points, so to speak, to make up the situation that we currently live in today. Republicans blaming the Democrats and the Democrats are blaming the Republicans. And as I told you, this is a game of tennis where the American people are the ball. The Republicans have a racket and the Democrats have a racket. And the nation is the net. And the only thing they're doing is playing back and forth, while all of them are still getting paid. By the way, the government is still getting paid. Those congressmen and the president are still getting paid. I just want to point that out. Let me carry on. Again, Democrats have condemned President Trump for refusing to use a contingency fund. So the Democrats are blaming the Republicans. And then right up here, they're blaming the Republicans. The Republicans are blaming the Democrats. It says, bottom line, the well has run dry, the department said in a notice on its website, which also blamed Democrats in the Senate for the impasse. This is perhaps the most cruel and unlawful offense the Trump administration has perpetrated yet, Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro and Angie Craig said in a joint statement on Friday. They also criticized Trump for providing assistance to Argentina and building a new White House ballroom during the shutdown. Now, again, the $250 million ballroom, 90,000 square feet, again, is a stickler in my side as millions of Americans are in need of this money. But with that being said, I think we should really get into the statistics of who this truly affects. Okay. Now, SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. This is coming from the Center Budget on Policies. And again, who's eligible for SNAP? They get into all of that information. How much do households receive in benefits? Okay. All of this is vital information for us to understand because a lot of people are not understanding the different demographics that people are receiving federal assistance. Okay. And as we even look at this one right here, let's go down here just a little bit. How SNAP benefits are adjusted. Give me 1 second. How much does SNAP cost? The federal government spends about $115 billion on SNAP, including pandemic-related SNAP benefits and other directly related food assistance programs. About $107 billion, or nearly 94% of SNAP spending, went directly to benefits that households use to purchase food. About 6% of SNAP spending in 2023 went to state administrative costs, and less than 1% of SNAP spending went to federal administrative costs. Okay, so we spend billions and billions and billions of dollars for government assistance for over 40 million Americans nationwide. Okay, What does the data say about food stamps in the U.S.? Okay, let me see. Let's just connect this. Let's get down to the meat and potatoes. Food stamp use surged during and after the Great Recession. Okay, the Great Recession was at 1920 or 1919. What was the Great Recession? I forgot. I know we had a recession back in 2008 when Obama was president, but we also had a Great Depression. I believe it was in 1920, if my memory serves me correctly. Now it goes on to who is eligible for food stamps. But again, food stamp checks will not be going out. Characteristics of SNAP recipients in the U.S. according to 2020. It says all recipients, and they kind of given the age, so between the ages of 25 to 44 and 45 to 64. That is the majority of Americans who are receiving SNAPs because, again, 1824, most of them really don't have children. And of course, when you hit your golden years, 65 plus, most of those children are now grown, so they're on their own. But the majority are the people who are between the age of 25 to 64 who are heavily dependent on SNAP benefits. Okay. What is the majority of the population who receive SNAP benefits? They said white, 62.7% of them receive SNAP benefits. And they said out of that 62.7%, because we understand that some Hispanic people who can pass as being white also, according to the Census Bureau, label themselves as white. So white people who are not Hispanic are roughly around 40%. And that's the number that you see right here. Okay, 40%. It goes on to saying that black people, okay, 27%, Asians, 3.8%, and then all other races, including Hispanics, 27%. Native born, 87.8%, and then foreign born, 12.2%. And if you look over here, it says non-Hispanic white people accounted for 44.6% of adult SNAP recipients and 31% of child recipients in 2020. It goes on to state that about 27% of both adult and child recipients were black. Hispanic people who can be of any race accounted for 21.9%. So black people at 27%, white people at 45% roughly, when you're not including those Hispanics who are Hispanics, not just Hispanics, ladies and gentlemen, my apologies, but people from the Middle East. According to the United States Census Bureau, people who derive from the Middle East, you also have white Hispanics. They all label themselves as white in America because they can get those trinkets, benefits, and handouts from the American government, as you see here. Now, I know a lot of people will say, well, when was this published? Because again, these dates do make a lot of sense. Now, again, according to the statistics, not all current statistics are going to be present day. Now, this is from 2023. So this is very, very recently. But I will go back just a little bit here. Okay, I had a website up here. This is coming from the United States Census Bureau. But this is somewhat old. This is from 2022. It kind of dates back from 2013 to 2019. Okay, but this was published in 2022, by the way. But the statistics is coming from 2013 to 2019, if that makes any sense. So let's jump right back into it. Excuse me. Some of the federal assistance that people are receiving, and I've been telling you this for years, CHIP, Children's Health Insurance Program. That is a social program that America provides. SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Don't forget about WIC, Women in Care. That's also another social program paid by federal and state governments. We also have Supplemental Security Income, SSI, TAF, Temporary Assistance for Needy Families. I told you all of these programs that comes from a very capitalist society that the government will tell you. I keep telling you that America is a hybrid. We have parts of our country that are socialist as well as parts of our country that are capitalist. I digress, okay? So now, let's get into some of the percentages here. Now, I already went down some of the social safety net benefits that you see here. And right now, we have that the race is white. You can't go to any other year. Right here, we're on 2022. Now, in 2022, they stated that roughly 21% of white Americans receive Medicaid and CHIP. 9.7 receive SNAP. 1.7 receive WIC. Free or reduced price school meal, 7.6. We get down here to Social Security and Medicare, 21% and 21.5%. Okay. So I want you kind of remember some of these key numbers here when it comes to Medicaid and SNAP, and when it comes to Social Security and Medicare. Okay. Because I'm going to change the demographic. I'm going to change the race to Black. Okay. Give me 1 second. There we go. Now, this number increased significantly for Medicaid and CHIP at 23.5% and SNAP 11.7%. I think it's like 1 or 2% off from with the white population receiving. But when you come to Social Security and Medicare, the white demographic were 1 to 2% more when it comes to Social Security and Medicaid, and Medicare. So again, these numbers are dating back from 2013 to 2019, and they have been published in 2022. The reason why I want to point out some of these, statistics and information on government websites, so the government will know so better than a Pew Research, right? Even though they're getting their information from the United States Department of Agriculture. Let me blow that up for you guys, okay? It's a Pew Research analysis of data from USDA Food and Nutrition Services, okay, of 2023. So this is more updated than you see here that, again, Black people are receiving more social benefits. So this is going to affect more white people than it is Black people. This is going to affect more Hispanic people than it is Black people. The only people that it won't really affect are Asians, okay? Because again, they're one of the richest demographics in America. And when you dive a little bit deeper into the ethnicity of Asians, Indian Asians or Indian Americans, Indian immigrants, Indian Asians are the ones who are probably on no government assistance at all. Okay, they're the richest Asian group in America. Now, last but not least, this is coming from, NIH, the National Library of Medicine, NIH, which is a federal government website. And I just want to scroll all the way down here. I want to show you key figure numbers of Table 1. It says, and this is the overall amount that people are receiving when it comes to government assistance. I want to show you that. And this is based on the composition of racial background among households that are eligible for supplemental assistance, programs, And it goes on to state that entirely white, 65%, these are the ones who qualify for it. And this is coming from a federal government website, the ones who qualify for it. 65% white and 22% Black. Let me scroll down even a little bit further. It says food insecurity and supplement nutrition assistance program participation by racial identity. I'm gonna get off screen here very quickly. I want you to see this. So it says entirely Asian, food insecurity not covered by SNAP, food insecurity covered by SNAP, and then food secure covered by SNAP. Look at Asians, a very small population of Asians, right? Black, we have an increase. This is around 62%. And then we have white roughly around, let's see, about 80%. But the majority of this is right here. Food secure, not covered by SNAP. This is going to hurt millions of Americans, over 40 million Americans. And the majority of the Americans that are going to be affected are going to be white Americans. But what's important here is not necessarily the race. This is the awakening of America. For quite some time, America has been playing us as fools in the division of race. And again, all the white supremacists, make sure you leave your comments down below and tell Black people how we just live off the system of welfare and social benefits, while the government is stating right here, right now, that not all millions of Americans are receiving social benefits from this government, but a great population, a great many of them are white Americans. So again, this is going to affect white Americans, Black Americans, Hispanics, and Asians. But we look at the two demographics, which I know there's some numbers in here that's really not being contribute. This is also going to affect a lot of Native Americans as well. And when I mean Native Americans, I mean the Native Americans that have features from Siberia and Mongolia, those red type Native Americans. It's going to affect them as well because they kind of blend them in with Black and Hispanic when it comes to our numbers. So our numbers are more inflated. And I could possibly show you that as well. I don't want to make this longer than what it has to be. But if you look that up, they kind of add their numbers into the Black and Hispanic numbers as well. So ladies and gentlemen, the reason why this is important is because for quite some time, I've been telling you guys, don't let this government play the whole right and left, the Democrat and the Republicans. They're playing the American people as fools. They could have come to a deal to add in Medicaid and extend the Affordable Health Care Act benefits to the end of the year, which the government wouldn't be shut down. People wouldn't be furloughed. People would be getting paid. People would be being covered for SNAP and all of these other social benefits that millions of Americans, actually depend on. Or that was the Republican side. They could have signed those extended health care benefits. Or the Democrats, could have bent the knee and say, okay, well, we don't want the American government to be shut down. Then the Democrats come out and state, well, we have a contingency fund. And the Republicans say, oh, well, that's for natural disasters. And some of you who are playing the right and left, oh, you woke and I'm MAGA and I'm a conservative and we shouldn't be living off the government. Stop looking at yourself and stop looking at the fellow American who may need this government assistance. Because as I stated, people are having less and less children because America is becoming so darn expensive. If you don't get it now, you may get it when it hits home for you. And hopefully that never happens, because who would want any American to starve and do bad? Because again, seems like all the immigrants come to America and do great, while Americans continue to do bad. Is it because Black people are being lazy, or America's being lazy, or were those just stereotypes you guys were playing around to fool the American people now that we all are suffering under the Trump administration? Tariffs, tariffs, tariffs. What a beautiful word.